Canberra, he says, and goes on to say, it's been a privilege and honour to represent this generous community, and also like to thank the Fisher LNP membership for their continued support, encouragement and trust. Now, this came just minutes ago after the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull gave a media conference here in Canberra, and ahead of a meeting of the LNP State Executive in Queensland where his fate was set to be decided. The LNP members in Fisher, who Mr Brough thanked in that statement, there were supportive of him recontesting the seat for the party, but there were some questions at a higher level about what him running would mean, given that there is still an Australian Federal Police investigation into the Peter Slipper affair. Now, if we cast our minds back to the Labor government when Peter Slipper shifted from the coalition to the Speaker's chair, Mal Brough, it's alleged, was involved with James Ashby, a former staffer of Peter Slipper, in copying extracts of the former Speaker's diary. Now, this is still under police investigation, much to the annoyance of Mr Brough and indeed probably most of the government, given that this has dragged on. Labor pounced on it or used it late last year to put pressure on the government. That saw Mal Brough stand aside as a minister in late December, at exactly the same time as Jamie Briggs resigned from the ministry, and earlier this year, just ahead of Malcolm Turnbull announcing his second ministry, Mal Brough said that he would not be putting his hand up to take a part in that ministry. So he's now announced he won't be contesting the next election. Of course, Mal Brough has been in Parliament in two separate periods. Of course, he was defeated at the 2007 election by a Labor candidate in the seat of Longman, and before that he was an Indigenous Affairs Minister in the Howard government, and then was a key backer of Malcolm Turnbull in his push for the leadership last year, and was rewarded with that Special Minister of State portfolio as well as responsibility for defence material. So he's been a minister twice over, he's been in government twice, but he won't be going around again at this election.
Yeah, Dan, is there any indication, obviously, as the government heads towards an election, it sets itself up there, that perhaps Mal Brough is too much of a liability if he's to remain in Parliament? Any sense that perhaps party power brokers tapped him on the shoulder?
That seems to be the indication, Andrew. I've just been given a story here by our Sunshine Coast reporter, Bruce Atkinson, who this morning reported that Mal Brough's political future was set to be decided at that meeting of the LNP executive in Brisbane today. We believe that that issue was going to be coming up a bit later on this afternoon, and he reported that it's understood the party hierarchy is concerned about the impact that the AFP investigation could have during an election campaign. Now, while Mal Brough certainly is out of the Labor's crosshairs during question time, he's now he's a backbencher, and of course the backbenchers don't get asked questions during the hottest part of the political day here in Parliament House. Certainly having him around, having the police investigation continue, whether that comes to an end or continued all throughout the year in the election campaign, there certainly would be a cloud over Mal Brough's head until that's sorted out. And we heard earlier this year from the AFP at Senate estimates that the amount of evidence that they're going through is enormous. We're talking about hundreds of pages of emails and records and documentation. Of course, last year there were raids on Mr Ashby's, an address linked to Mr Ashby, as well as an AFP visit to Mr Brough. So with that set to continue for an unknown period of time, as far as we know, you could see how it could be seen as a political liability.
Dan, thanks very much. That's Dan Conifer at Parliament House.